What if the tempests that submerge towns, the arid spells that fracture the soil, and the deluges that obliterate hamlets are not mere weather, but omens? What if dragons persist, not as creatures, but as divine protectors of harmony, lying dormant beneath peaks, oceans, and heavens? And what if one woman's sorrow could rouse them? This is the hidden saga of the 9 dragons, celestial entities who once sculpted China's firmament, and the mortal who ventured to summon them when humanity forgot its ancient vow. Welcome to Tales of Mythology, where forgotten epics, buried terrors, and otherworldly battles spring to life. If you're captivated by the unexplored facets of lore, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell below to stay updated with every mythical tale. Silence. Music. Parched earth sprawled where a mighty river once coursed beneath a searing sky. Not a trickle remained, only dust, fish skeletons, and the hush of a world that seemed forsaken by its keepers. Ling knelt in the riverbed's fissured clay, her fingers brushing a jagged crevice that wound toward the skyline. Why had the rain ceased, leaving the land to shrivel? Had the river's ancient dragon deserted them, or had human transgressions driven it away? The queries lingered in her thoughts as a heavy stillness cloaked the air, offering no reply. At a dilapidated shrine by the river's edge, shell chimes dangled motionless. Once, they hummed with every gentle gust the water dragon bestowed. Now, even the breeze had perished. Ling stood, dusting her face. She recalled the elders, stories of the 9 dragons, who once upheld the world's equilibrium, each a sentinel of a sacred domain, heavens, stream, ocean, tempest, ridge, and beyond. But those were mere tales now. Her Village's well was barren, and crops had withered to shells. Many neighbors dismissed those stories as vain hope. Yet Ling persisted, murmuring prayers at the crumbling shrine each morning, pleading for the dragon's return. She refused to accept that the sacred ones had vanished entirely. Perhaps this quiet was a trial of belief. Bracing her ear to the earth, eyes shut, she sometimes fancied hearing a faint pulse deep below, as if a colossal being slumbered far beneath. A memory surged, the final night before her husband, Hien, succumbed to a fever under the merciless sun. His hand had clasped hers with fierce resolve. "The dragons will stir," he had whispered, his voice fragile as brittle twigs. "When our need peaks, they will heed us." Those were his final words. Ling had held fast to them, even as his life faded. Could she fulfill his dying wish, or would even love's vow crumble to dust? A sudden breeze swirled, scattering grit across the shrine. Ling inhaled sharply. The wind, absent for weeks, had awakened. Above, the pale sky darkened as a faint shroud of sickly yellow dust veiled the sun. It wasn't the slate of storm clouds, but the ochre tinge of an approaching dust storm. Still, it was motion. She glanced at the stone dragon entwined around the Sin's gate. For a moment, she imagined its carved eyes gleamed. The shell chimes clinked faintly. Ling's heart raced. Some force still lingered, listening. She took it as a portent. If the river's dragon remained silent, perhaps another would respond. Other dragons existed in the vast world. Perhaps the entire earth's balance had been disrupted, not just her valley. But if all was in disarray, what could one woman do alone? Ling thought of the frail elders and children left behind, their eyes hollow with hopelessness. If she stayed idle, she would witness their final sparks fade. That destiny, she rejected. Bracing herself, Ling bowed before the shrine. In a steady, quivering voice, she spoke into the quiet, "Mighty dragon, hear me. If you sleep, I will find and awaken you. If you be forsaken us, I will track your path. If we be wronged you, I will repair what we be shatter." No response came from the cracked statue or the vacant sky, but voicing the pledge kindled a flame of determination in her soul. As dusk fell, she gathered essentials for a long trek. In her shadowed hut, Ling draped herself in Hien's worn traveling cloak and slung a small pack over her shoulder. Inside, she tucked her husband's leather-bound notebook of myths, a treasured collection of tales he had gathered. In one entry, Jian had sketched a peak encircled by 9 serpentine forms, captioned with a hopeful query, "9 Dragon Summit?" It was a slender lead, but all she had. Securing the journal, Ling stepped into the twilight, leaving her home behind. For a moment, she stood, eyes fixed on the horizon, where distant blazes painted the sky amber, the air heavy with soot. She whispered a quiet farewell to the only home she'd known and turned eastward, tracing the dry riverbed toward the ancient path. Ling pressed on under a bruised violet sky, through fields of ash and skeletal trees that snapped beneath her steps. The night grew eerily still again, even the breeze had faded after that lone gust. Near the broken village gate, her foot struck something solid, half buried in the soil. She knelt and swept the dirt away, uncovering a smooth, iridescent scale the size of her palm. It gleamed emerald and gold, even in the faint starlight. Ling's heart surged, a dragon's scale. Warmth radiated from it into her hand. It must have been recently shed. Was it a marker left for her, evidence that the ancient ones were more than myth? Holding the scale to her chest, she felt a wave of hope. Perhaps she was on the true path after all. As she stood, a low rumble echoed across the plain. The breeze returned in a sharp gust, lashing her hair and cloak. Above, dense clouds coalesced from the darkness, obscuring the stars. Ling froze. Was that thunder in the distance, or the echo of some vast creature's growl, stirring beyond sight? A shiver ran through her. The long silence of the drought had broken, but by what? In the quiet ruin of that night, a solitary wanderer sat out beneath a wounded sky. The wind bore both a dirge and a challenge. Who will restore the covenant that was broken? Who will dare seek the guardians lost to time? With a dragon scale pressed to her heart and resolve burning in her veins, she did not turn back. The darkness ahead was vast and riddled with mysteries, mysteries only the journey could unravel. And so, into that gaping unknown, she pressed forward, unaware of the trials and marvels awaiting her before dawn, unaware of the ancient gaze tracking her from afar, or the subtle tremor that pulsed through the slumbering earth in response to her resolve. Dix. Ling's breath echoed in the narrow tunnel as she descended into the mountain's throat, each step taking her further from the lone daylight behind. She had discovered this hidden passage behind the dried waterfall at the river's source, guided by the faint glow and hum of the dragon scale. Now, swallowed by darkness, she pressed onward, fingers tracing damp stone walls. How far did this passage go, and what lay at its end? The question loomed with every hesitant step. Her foot splashed into a shallow pool. Startled, Ling jerked back, nearly dropping her torch. Warm water swirled around her ankle, rippling gently as if stirred from below. Deep underground, even a small spring felt miraculous, but this puddle alone could not save her dying lands above. Ling carefully stepped around it, deeper into an immense cavern beyond. The air smelled of minerals and something like burnt metal. All around, shapes loomed in the dark. She held the torch high, and her eyes widened. Piles of coins and jewels mounted like hills, jade figurines and ancient weapons lay scattered, gleaming in her firelight. It was an impossible treasury hidden beneath the earth. Ling's mouth fell open in awe. She took an involuntary step forward, mesmerized by the soft glow of gold and jade, then halted. It wasn't her torchlight alone illuminating this chamber. Lanterns now hung along the cavern walls, swaying gently. The scent of sweet incense wafted by. Bewildered, Ling turned in a slow circle. In place of the cold cavern, a sunlit garden had blossomed before her. Beneath a cherry tree in full bloom stood her husband, Hien, alive and smiling warmly. Warm rain began to fall softly around them. Overcome with joy, she ran into Hien's arms, tears of relief on her cheeks. It felt so real. Could their nightmare truly be over? For a moment, she believed it utterly. But as he guided her toward a cozy cottage that appeared among the blossoms, a faint hiss under his voice made her blood run cold. His eyes glinted reptilian gold. This was not real. Ling wrenched herself free, heart breaking anew, and the idyllic vision shattered around her into darkness. In the gloom where her husband had stood, now loomed a serpentine dragon, its scales glinting like molten metal. It called around mounds of treasure, studying Ling with burning amber eyes. Terror clenched her heart, but she refused to cower. Drawing herself up, Ling met the creature's gaze. I have no desire for your riches, she declared, voice steady. My people are dying. If you are truly one of the ancient guardians, help me restore balance instead of toying with me. The dragon's lip curled, smoky laughter rattling the cavern. Bold words for a mortal, it hissed. But after a long, tense moment, it dipped its great head. Very well. Your heart is true. I will aid you. With a swipe of its claw, the dragon unearthed a luminescent pearl from a pile of gold and gently rolled it toward her. Take this, Fusant Lonintonid, a dragon's pearl, my essence. It will protect you where mortals cannot. Ling cradled the warm, glowing sphere, feeling power thrumming within. Seek the storm dragon on the high cliffs, the creature continued, echoing through the cavern. Shenlong, keeper of rain, rages at humanity's neglect. Only by calming his fury will the heavens forgive your world. Go, and show him the same courage you showed me. Suddenly, the cavern groaned and began to collapse. Ling sprinted toward the tunnel, scrambling up the dark passage as stones crashed down around her. She burst out of the narrow crevice into open air, just as the path sealed behind her with a thunderous crash. Dawn was breaking. Pale light revealed the valley below, shrouded in a swirling mass of black storm clouds. Thunder rolled in the distance, and the wind whipped violently at the trees on the mountainside. The storm Fusang Lon warned of had arrived with a vengeance. Ling pushed herself upright, aching and filthy but alive. Nestled against her side, inside her satchel, she felt the comforting thrum of the dragon's pearl, proof that the encounter in the depths had been real, not another illusion. She gazed in awe and fear at the rolling sky. Lightning forked within the churning belly of the storm, and a distant roar carried on the wind that did not sound like any thunder she had ever heard. Could that be Shenlong's voice, echoing across the heavens? How was she to calm such fury? Pulling Hien's cloak tight around her, Ling squared her shoulders. Whatever the tempest held, she would face it. She emerged from the cavern into chaos. Rain lashed the mountainside, and the once empty sky was now alive with furious thunder and lightning. A dragon's roar mingled with every crash of thunder, shaking the very air. What power awaited her in the heart of the tempest? Would courage alone suffice against the wrath of the sky? Lightning split the sky as she braced herself but did not waver. Clutching the pearl that pulsed with otherworldly light, Ling stepped forward into the howling wind, determined to confront the raging storm and the mighty dragon who ruled it. Tempest. Rain slashed at Ling's face as she climbed the jagged path toward the storm's heart. Above her, the sky was a furious swirl of black clouds, illuminated by forks of lightning. Each thunderclap felt like the roar of a wrathful god. She pressed on, fingers numb as they gripped wet rocks. Far below, in the valley, she glimpsed rooftops half submerged by floodwaters and fields turned to lakes. The village she had sworn to save was drowning before her eyes. Despair threatened to take hold. How could one person hope to calm a storm that could swallow an entire world? At last, Ling hauled herself onto a rocky ledge high on the mountainside. This was the summit of the cliff, a place where the winds raged unchecked. She was battered and soaked, clothes plastered to her skin. Nearby, a weathered altar of stone stood, perhaps placed by ancient villagers who once prayed here for rain. It seemed a cruel irony now. Ling steadied herself against the altar, drawing the dragon's pearl from her satchel. The pearl glowed fiercely, shimmering in harmony with each flash of lightning, as if answering the SKYS anger. Mastering every ounce of courage, Ling raised the pearl high and shouted into the gale, Shenlong, great dragon of the storm, hear me. Her voice was nearly torn away by the wind, rain whipping her words into tatters. But she continued, pouring all her desperation and hope into the cry, spare these lands. If you are angered, vent your fury on me, but please have mercy on those who suffer. Lightning exploded across the clouds in response, and a deafening boom of thunder nearly split the air. Suddenly, the wind died for one eerie moment. The clouds directly above Ling swirled, forming a gaping vortex of boiling gray. In the eerie half-light, a vast shape uncalled within the storm, a serpentine form of cloud and azure scales emerged. Its long whiskers crackled with electricity. Two enormous eyes, cold and blue as the heart of the tempest, fixed upon the lone human standing on the ledge. Shenlong had answered the summons. Lin's breath caught in her throat. The storm dragon's presence was overwhelming. It was as long as the horizon, his cold body both cloud and flesh, his claws gripping the currents of the sky. It circled above, each movement sending torrents of rain and gusts of wind screaming down. When Shenlong spoke, his voice was the thunder. "Mortal speck, you dare call upon me?" The words rattled the stones under Lin's feet. She nearly faltered, knees weakening under the weight of that voice. Fear churned in her stomach, but she forced herself to stand tall. "I dare because I must," she shouted back, her small voice swallowed in the vast space between claps of thunder. She held up the glowing pearl like a beacon. "I carry the gift of your kin and the hopes of those below. They have not all forgotten you. Banish me if you wish, but not them." Her plea echoed against the cliffs. For a heartbeat, Shenlong's massive form paused, hovering amid the twisting clouds. Lightning danced along the length of his body. Then a rumble reverberated, a sound somewhere between a growl and a bitter laugh. "Empty words," the sky roared. "Where were those hopes when my rivers ran dry? Where was honor when humans burned the sacred forests and fouled the air? Now they cry for mercy." The dragon's contempt hit her like a physical force. "You ask me to spare them, they who offered no respect, no sacrifice, who let my name fade into myth? No, little human. Let the world feel my wrath. Let them remember the price of forsaking the old ways." With that, Shenlong descended in a furious call. His ethereal form plunged toward Ling, the clouds he dragged in his wake falling like a raging waterfall. In an instant, hurricane-force wind slammed into her. She was flung backward against the altar with bone-jarring force. Stars burst in her vision as pain seared her back. The pearl flew from her hand, skittering across the stone. Dust, Ling scrambled on hands and knees before another gust could sweep her over the cliff's edge. The storm dragon's roar shook the air again as he swooped lower, lightning crackling about his horned snout. Lin's fingers found the dragon's pearl. Desperately, she clutched it to her chest and forced herself upright. Shenlong's serpentine body twisted through the air just above the ledge now, circling her like a predator around prey. His opaque form blotted out the sky. The rain was a solid sheet of silver, and each drop felt like a needle against her skin. A low growl emanated from the dragon's maw. It was waiting for her next move, perhaps relishing her apparent helplessness. Bruised and shaking, Ling steadied herself. Blood trickled from a cut on her brow, mixing with rain. She realized that simply begging would not sway this ancient being's rage. She needed to remind Shenlong who humans once were, who they could be again. With trembling hands, she took the pearl and pressed it to her forehead, closing her eyes. She began to chant an old prayer her grandmother taught her long ago, a plea to the dragon of the eastern sea for rain. Her voice started soft, barely audible in the howling storm, but she poured her soul into each line. She recalled the words as best she could, an apology, a promise, a reverence. The wind seemed to catch her prayer and carry it upward. Shenlong's eyes narrowed, thunder rolling in discontent. He unleashed a bolt of lightning toward the ground at her feet, close enough to scorch the rock, as if to silence her. Ling cried out as the flash blinded her for an instant, but she did not stop. Her chant, would the dragon strike her down in anger? Possibly. Yet she continued, louder now, voicing both sorrow and hope into the maelstrom. If this was to be her end, at least she would die upholding the ancient respect that others had forgotten. Another flash, this time, the lightning coiled around the pearl in her hand and dissipated with a furious hiss. The dragon's pearl glowed brilliant white, somehow shielding her from the lethal force. Shenlong recalled slightly, confusion rippling across his celestial face. Ling took a deep breath and stepped away from the altar, closer to the edge. With one hand raised high, clutching the radiating pearl, and the other hand pressed to her heart, she finished the prayer in a clear, unwavering shout, "Great dragon, we beseech your forgiveness." The storm seemed to hold its breath. Rain still fell, and the wind howled, but Shenlong himself had paused. His colossal form loomed only a few yards from the ledge. Those fierce blue eyes regarded the drenched, solitary human before him, a woman who, by all rights, should have been swept away by the tempest, yet still stood, shining with the light of dragonkind. Ling's chest heaved. She was exhausted and terrified, but she met the storm god's gaze without fear. For a long moment, dragon and mortal locked eyes. Lightning flickered silently in the clouds, illuminating the tears of frustration and fervor on Ling's face. Finally, Shenlong spoke, and this time his voice rumbled not with fury, but with a deep, ancient sorrow. Why do you cry out so, little one? Why do you not cower before my judgment? Ling lowered the glowing portal slightly. Because, she replied hoarsely, I remember you. We remember in our legends and hearts, even if we fail to honor you. I refuse to believe it's too late to mend what's broken. I stand here as proof that we have not all forgotten our promises. She placed the portal gently on the altar between them as an offering, its light casting dancing reflections on the dragon's rain-slick scales. Punish those who wronged you if you must, but do not forsake the earth that depends on your grace. Please, let us atone. Shenlong's great head lowered, his whiskers brushing the ground as he peered at the portal and the humble, soaked figure across from him. The fury and the storm began to ebb. The driving sheets of rain eased into a steady drizzle, and the violent winds calmed to a stiff breeze. A tremor passed through the dragon's cold form, as if an inner conflict raged. Ling held her breath, silent under that expectant sky. Had her words reached him? Would the dragon of storms relent, or unleash one final fury to scour the world? At last, Shenlong drew back slightly, the clouds around him lightening from black to a bruised purple. Your kind has been foolish, human, he declared, voice still thunderous but no longer edged with wrath. Yet your heart is true. Exile, and the gust that struck Ling was warm and gentle. The dragon's eyes drifted from the portal to Ling again. I shall hold back the floods for now. Go, and ensure that the old ways are not lost again. If they are, his voice hardened for a beat, but then softened, if they are not, even your brave spirit will be able to save your world next time. Ling collapsed to her knees as the immense pressure in the air finally released. Overhead, the churning vortex of cloud began to disperse. Patches of light broke through, illuminating the rain-soaked cliffs. The storm was subsiding. Shenlong's form grew diffuse, his azure scales blending back into mist and cloud. Before he vanished completely, the dragon gave Ling a final, searching look. She bowed deeply, forehead touching the stone despite the puddles. When she raised her head, the storm dragon was gone. Only a rolling echo. Ling closed her fingers around it and pressed it to her heart in thanks. Far below, she saw villagers stumbling out into the open, gazing at the breaking clouds with disbelief and jaw. The deluge had stopped. Gentle raindrops fell on the thirsty earth without destruction. But even as the skies cleared, Ling felt anew unease. Eager above, a call of inky cloud lingered, unnaturally dark against the brightening sky. Her pulse quickened. Was this another wrathful dragon, or something far worse lurking in the storm's shadow? The heavens fell quiet as the great storm dragon withdrew. Ling stood on the rain-soaked cliff, peering up at a menacing blot of darkness coiling in the clearing sky. What new presence rose in the storm's wake? Was a greater trial yet to come? Though rain still dripped from her hair and she trembled with exhaustion, Ling grasped her pearl and tattered courage once more, sensing that her journey with the dragons was far from over. Shadows. Ling opened her eyes to darkness and the echo of a voice she had not heard in years. One moment, she was on the rain-soaked cliff, the next, she found herself standing in a vast hall lit by ghostly blue flames. The air was cold and thin. Shadows stretched impossibly tall along carved stone walls. At the far end of the hall, 9 massive dragon statues loomed, their eyes glittering in the dim light. A chill ran through her. Where was she? Had she collapsed and begun to dream, or wandered into another realm entirely? A soft whisper drifted from the darkness between the statues. Ling, it was her grandmother's voice. Ling's heart clenched. She stepped forward, feet soundless on the polished floor. Anna, she called, using the Chinese word for grandmother. Her voice echoed. One by one, the blue flames on the walls flared brighter, illuminating frescoes and inscriptions that had faded with antiquity. They depicted scenes of great catastrophes, a sky split in two, floods consuming ancient villages, fire raining from the heavens. In each scene, a serpentine dragon was present, sometimes protecting, sometimes unleashing destruction. Ling approached the nearest wall painting. It showed a horned black dragon thrashing in a churning sea, while a woman in white, Nuba, the sky mender, tried desperately to mend a broken sky overhead. Ling recognized the legend, the time when the water god Gong Gong, in his fury, smashed the pillar of heaven and caused chaos across the earth. Her fingertips traced the cracks painted in the sky of that mural. Was this a warning about the darkness she'd seen lingering after Shenlong's storm? Two glowing ruby eyes lit up within the onyx dragon statue at the end of the hall. Stone scraped on stone as the massive sculpture moved, slithering off its pedestal and lowering its head toward Ling. She stood frozen as it spoke, its voice ancient and echoing from all directions. Mortals broke the world once before. They merely unleashed endless darkness. Will history repeat itself? Ling found her voice, though it trembled. I have come to prevent it. Please, if you have wisdom to share, I am listening. The torch flames along the walls flared, illuminating the other statues. Each dragon figure was different, one bore antlers, one had vast wings, another coiled protectively around a sphere. The 9 dragons themselves seemed to be watching her now. In the blink of an eye, the great hall transformed around her. Ling saw her home valley as it had been ages ago, villagers gathered at a riverside shrine, offering prayers and humble tokens to the dragons, the fields green and the river full. Then the vision shifted. The same valley appeared in more recent times, the shrine abandoned and overgrown, people heedless as the river ran shallow and dirty under a smog-filled sky. No prayers, no respect, only forgetfulness. A deep tremor shook the vision. From the darkened clouds above the neglected valley, a colossal black dragon emerged with as of blazing wrath. It was Gong Gong, the ancient nemesis. It struck the earth with titanic fury. Mountains cracked, and a torrent of black water roared forth, consuming everything. Ling watched in horror as the flood swept over the land, an all-engulfing darkness aimed to drown the world. With a gasp, Ling jolted awake. She was lying on solid ground in a shallow cave, her body shivering and drenched in sweat. Pale dawnlight filtered through the cave mouth, revealing her soaked travel clothes and mud-caked hands. It had felt so real. She pushed herself up, heart pounding, every detail of the vision carved into her memory, the harmony of the past, the negligence of the present, and the vengeful roar of Gong Gong as he brought ruin. The darkness she had seen after Shenlong's storm now had a name and a purpose. It was Gong Gong's malice, awakened and ready to finish what he once began. Ling staggered to the cave entrance. Outside, the morning was calm, gentle mist hung over the recovering valley. But she knew a greater storm was coming, one far worse than drought or tempest. In the distance, a low rumble sounded, though no thunderclouds marred the sky. It emanated from deep within the earth, as if the world itself was growling in anticipation. Ling clenched her fists. She would not let history repeat itself. She had won over the dragons of water and sky, now she would have to confront the primordial wrath of the earth. The final and fiercest challenge lay ahead. Dawn broke, pale and silent, but Ling's soul brimmed with urgent purpose. The visions of night had bared the truth, an ancient evil stirred beneath the fragile peace, eager to drown the world in chaos once more. Would they hold fast to these lessons when new challenges arose? Steeling herself, Ling stepped out of the cave into the cool morning air, resolved to face the looming shadow of Gong Gong and determined to ensure that, this time, the pillars of heaven would not fall. Ras. Low clouds raced across a bruised sky as Ling traversed the shattered plain where the final battle would be fought. Each step felt heavier than the last. The earth beneath her was cracked and steaming, as if the land itself anticipated the coming fury. In the distance stood the broken remnants of an ancient mountain, Mount Busou, according to legend, the sky pillar that Gong Gong once toppled in his rage. Now, only jagged stumps of rock reached toward the heavens like grasping fingers. Ling knew in her heart that the dark presence gathering would be here soon. Could she, even with all she had learned, truly stand against the hate of a vengeful god? Thunder rumbled in the distance, though no rain fell. Instead, an unnatural heat pressed down on the plain. Ling wiped sweat from her brow and climbed onto a large slab of stone to gain a better view. The dragon's pearl at her neck pulsed softly. She had strung it on a cord after the storm, and it never left her skin. Now it flickered in warning, attuned to the imbalance in the air. The river dragon's scale, tucked at her belt, vibrated as well. Both tokens seemed to resonate with the deep groan of the earth. A fissure split the ground not far ahead, and from it seeped a pool of black water. Ling's pulse quickened. The pool churned and began to spread, corrupting the soil it touched. With a sudden hissing boil, it erupted upward like a geyser. Ling staggered back, nearly losing her footing on the trembling ground. The geyser spray coalesced in the air, forming the shape of a colossal serpent. Crimson as flared open within the spiraling mass of enchanted water and cloud. Gong Gong had a wrath. The water dragon's form solidified, scales slick and dark as oil, a mane of writhing black smoke around his horned head. It towered above the broken pillar of Mount Bujo, larger than any dragon Ling had yet seen. A single clawed arm struck the mountainside, and stone shattered like glass. Gong Gong's maw opened in a soundless snarl. Ling felt sheer terror freeze her limbs. The primordial hatred emanating from him was suffocating. This was the being who nearly ended the world ages ago, and he looked ready to finish the job. Summoning every ounce of courage, Ling forced herself to speak. Gong Gong, she shouted, her voice echoing thinly against the ruins. It's me you want. I know mankind failed the balance, but destroying everything will not set things right. Her words sounded pitifully small against the gargantuan deity before her. Gong answered with a roar that shook the heavens. The black water of his body surged forward in a tidal wave, aimed directly at Ling. She braced behind a jut of rock as the wave slammed down. Water crashed and frothed around her shelter, pounding at it with terrifying force. The stone at her back trembled, on the verge of collapse. The dragon's pearl around her neck flared, generating a faint dome of light that deflected the worst of the torrent away from her position. Even so, the impact left her ears ringing and her heart hammering. When the waters receded a moment later, the protective light faded, and Ling gasped for breath. The rock she'd crouched behind was now eroded to half its size. Through the receding flood, a brilliant green shape darted toward Ling and called protectively before her. It was Jinglong, the winged dragon, come to her aid. Shenlong and Tianlong streaked across the dark sky behind Gong Gong, lightning and divine fire at the ready. The allied dragons converged on the colossal demon in coordinated music. Golden sunlight poured over the valley of Ling's birth, illuminating a landscape transformed by hope and renewal. Where once cracked earth lay desolate, rice paddies now shimmered with water and new green shoots. The great river, restored by honest rains, wound lazily through fertile banks. It was hard to believe that 1 year ago, this valley had nearly been destroyed by drought and chaos. Ling walked a well-worn path toward the rebuilt river shrine, a wicker basket of offerings tucked under her arm. Children skipped alongside her, their laughter bright. They carried small wooden dragon figurines they had carved and painted themselves. Ling had often retold the tale to the village children, who never tired of hearing how she soared with the 9 dragons and vanquished the dark enemy. They arrived at the shrine, once crumbled and forsaken, now lovingly restored by the villagers' own hands. Fresh flowers and fruits adorned the altar. The carved stone dragon that guarded it had been cleaned and painted anew, its features smiling down benignly. Ling placed her basket of ripe persimmons and incense on the altar, and the children gently set their wooden dragons beside it as offerings. A soft breeze rustled the willow trees by the water, as if in acknowledgement. Ling closed her eyes and offered a prayer of gratitude, not out of desperation, as in the old days of suffering, but out of respect and joy. Much had changed in 1 year. After the great battle, word of the valley's salvation spread far and wide. People from neighboring villages and distant towns traveled here to learn the old ways anew. Under Ling's guidance, they rebuilt what had been forgotten, seasonal festivals to honor the river dragon, songs to call gentle rains, ceremonies to thank the soil and the sky. At first, some elders worried the interest would fade once life returned to normal comfort. Would people keep their promises when crisis was no longer at their door? But Ling remained steadfast. She knew true change had taken root. She could see it in the eager faces of the young and the earnest work of the community tending this sacred place. As the morning sun climbed higher, villagers gathered by the river for the spring blessing ceremony. Ling took her place at the front, wearing simple robes embroidered with 9 interwoven dragons. With her stood the village headman and the oldest grandmother, both holding scrolls of prayers once recited by their ancestors. Together, they led the people in chorus. The words, nearly lost to time, rose strong and clear into the pure air, an ancient plea for harmony between heaven and earth and a pledge to honor that harmony every day to come. When the last note of the song drifted away, a hush fell over the assembled crowd. In that silence, a deep contentment filled Ling's heart. She stepped to the riverbank and lifted the ceremonial cup of sweet rice wine, brewed for this day. With a graceful motion, she poured the wine into the river as an offering. To the dragons, she proclaimed, voice ringing out over the water, we thank you. At that moment, sunlight broke through the few clouds above, and for an instant, Ling thought she saw 9 shimmering forms reflected in the river's surface, claws and wings and claws, watching over them. A familiar emerald shape flashed in the corner of her vision. She smiled quietly, recognizing Jinglong's playful presence riding the breeze. Though no one else noticed, the dragons kept their distance now, but Ling could sense their joy at the humans' sincere devotion. They would always be near when needed. The villagers dispersed into cheerful chatter, children playing tag among the reeds, parents and grandparents exchanging contented smiles. Ling remained by the river a while longer, gazing at her reflection amid the drifting flower petals. She hardly recognized the person she had been before this journey, a simple village woman who had dared to face legends. Now, she was a bridge between worlds, entrusted with keeping this precious connection alive. It was a responsibility she embraced with humble pride. At length, Ling turned to rejoin her community. In the distance, fields of rice swayed, and fruit trees bloomed, promise in every branch. The valley was alive with color and song, as if the land itself celebrated a second spring. And high above, a single dragon-shaped cloud drifted across the sky, golden in the morning light. Ling raised her hand in a small wave, unsure if a dragon or merely her imagination looked down. Either way, she felt a warm assurance in her soul that they would never truly be gone, not as long as people remember. In the years to come, sons of the 9 dragons would echo at every harvest, and their images would watch over every doorway. Children would grow up learning to respect the rivers, the rains, the earth, knowing these gifts were safeguarded by ancient friends. The era of disconnect and indifference had washed away with the dark flood. In its place dawned a new age of reverence and balance. Ling closed her eyes and inhaled the scent of wet earth and spring blossoms. This was the world she had dreamed of when she first left her dying village in search of hope. As the valley thrived under gentle skies, its people cherished the sacred story of the 9 dragons. Would they hold fast to these lessons when new challenges arose? Ling believed so with all her heart. And surrounded by fertile fields and the quiet guardianship of ageless dragons, she stepped forward into the future, confident that humanity and the natural world would journey as one in wisdom and wonder for generations to come. Music.